"You're not going to MIT," my dad said. "Your place is here, taking care of your brother." That night, I packed my savings and disappeared. Years later, they came begging for my help. Hey Reddit, before we start, I just want to say that this is our new channel, and we're really working hard to bring you the best stories. So make sure to subscribe to get us 1,000 subscribers very soon. Let's start the story. For as long as I can remember, everything in my life revolved around my younger brother, Ethan. He was born with a rare neurological disorder that left him nonverbal and severely developmentally delayed. My parents, especially my father, made it clear that Ethan was the priority, and that as the older child, I was expected to understand, to compromise, to sacrifice. And I did. I missed birthdays, skipped field trips, and watched other kids play while I helped feed Ethan or clean up after one of his episodes. I didn't complain because I thought it was what a good son, a good brother did. But over time, that sacrifice stopped being something noble and started becoming something demanded. My dreams, my goals, they were treated like inconveniences that got in the way of Ethan's care. When I was 16, I started to feel the walls closing in. My father became more distant, more stern, and my mother just looked tired all the time. Anytime I brought up college, it was shot down. I was told not to get my hopes up, that college was a luxury we couldn't afford, not when Ethan needed round-the-clock support. But I studied anyway, in secret sometimes. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I'd sit with my old laptop, work through online courses, solve practice SAT problems, and read books I borrowed from the public library. I wasn't just dreaming, I was building an escape. And when the day finally came, when I opened the acceptance letter from MIT, I felt like I could finally breathe. I had done it. I was going to escape. I remember the exact moment I told my parents. I waited until dinner, shaking with excitement, and when I handed my father the letter, expecting at least some pride, he barely glanced at it before tossing it aside. His voice was flat, cold. "You're not going to MIT. Your place is here. Your brother needs you." That one sentence shattered everything. My mother didn't say a word. She just kept eating, eyes fixed on her plate like it wasn't happening. I felt like I was suffocating. Years of work, hope, dreams, dismissed like they were nothing. My father didn't even try to explain. It was simply expected that I would give up everything I wanted because Ethan needed someone to look after him. Because, as my dad put it, "You're the only one who knows how to handle him." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking of all the nights I had stayed up studying, all the hours I spent trying to prove that I was more than just Ethan's backup caregiver. I thought about the future, what it would look like if I stayed. No college, no independence, just years, maybe decades, of sacrifice and silence. I looked over at my suitcase in the corner, and something just clicked. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. So I got up, silently packed what little I had. My acceptance letter, the $1,200 I had saved over the past 2 years from tutoring and odd jobs, a few clothes, and my laptop. I left a note, not out of guilt, but to make it clear, I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself for once. I took a bus to Boston the next morning, and the first few months were brutal. I slept on floors, in basements, even in libraries a couple of nights. I picked up a job washing dishes while I applied for grants, appealed to the university's financial aid office, and practically lived in the campus housing department begging for emergency accommodations. But I never gave up. Eventually, I found a scholarship program for students in crisis and landed a part-time job at a research lab. Every step forward felt like a battle, but I was free. I was finally living my own life. Years passed, and I graduated top of my class. I got hired by a top robotics firm, eventually moved into AI research, and now I lead a team designing assistive tech for people with disabilities, a purpose I shaped around my experience with Ethan. Funny how the very thing that trapped me became my drive to build something better. I hadn't spoken to my parents in all that time. I sent them one letter after I graduated. No return address, just a photo of me in my cap and gown, and a note that said, "I made it." That was it. But 3 months ago, I got an email. Not from my parents, but from a social worker in my hometown. My father had a stroke. My mother had fallen into depression and was barely functioning. Ethan, now 19, was severely neglected. Their savings were gone. The house was falling apart, and CPS was involved. The social worker said my parents had listed me as their last hope. The son they drove away, I thought bitterly. At first, I ignored the email. I had built a life. I had no obligation to go back, not after what they had done, what they had denied me. But something gnawed at me. Not for my parents. They made their bed, but for Ethan. He didn't ask for any of this. He was always innocent in all of it. And now he was suffering because the people who were supposed to care for him let everything collapse. I told myself I'd just go for a few days, just to assess the situation, maybe see if there was a better facility for him. I didn't tell anyone at work. I just packed a bag and flew home for the first time in nearly a decade. And what I found was worse than anything I imagined. The house smelled like mold and rot. My father was thin, bitter, and half paralyzed. My mother barely looked me in the eye. And Ethan, my heart shattered when I saw him. He was so much thinner, his eyes hollow, movements agitated and repetitive. He was scared, confused, alone. They had failed him, completely. And now, after pushing me away, after treating me like a burden, they were begging me, to save the very situation they forced me to run from. I wanted to scream at them, to remind them of the night my dad crushed my dreams with one sentence. To ask them where their sense of responsibility had gone when they let Ethan rot in a corner while the house crumbled. But instead, I said nothing. I walked into Ethan's room, sat beside him, and just held his hand. His eyes flicked toward mine, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of something: recognition, maybe comfort. I didn't know. That night, as I sat in the old guest room, my room, I looked around at the posters still on the wall, the cracked window frame, the closet that once held all my dreams before they were dismissed like trash. And I knew what I had to do. Not for them, but for Ethan. For the brother who never asked for a caregiver, never demanded my life, but had it stolen from both of us all the same. I made a call the next morning. Not to CPS, not to a lawyer, but to someone I had once worked with, someone who owed me a favor. And that call set off a chain of events that would change everything. For Ethan, for me, and eventually, even for my parents. I came back to save my brother after they drove me away, but I didn't expect what happened next. The favor I called in came from a former professor at MIT, someone who had moved into the private sector and ran a nonprofit that focused on providing care solutions for people with severe disabilities. I told him everything about Ethan, the conditions I found him in, the years I had spent trying to escape the life I was now staring in the face again. He didn't hesitate. He said he'd fly out the next morning, bring a specialist, and help me put together an emergency plan. He didn't make me beg. For once in my life, someone saw the situation for what it was and wanted to help without conditions. While I waited for them to arrive, I spent every moment with Ethan. He was still nonverbal, still locked inside his mind, but I could feel his awareness flickering back to life. I brought him outside, sat with him in the sun, played him the same music we used to listen to as kids. He reacted to some of it. He would turn his head, rock slightly, even reach out for my hand. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell me he was still in there, still waiting. My parents didn't say much. My mother cried once, late at night when she thought I couldn't hear her. My father stayed mostly silent, stuck in a wheelchair, bitterness carved deep into his face. When he finally did speak to me, it wasn't an apology. It was a question. What are you going to do? I didn't answer him right away, because truthfully, I didn't know. Part of me wanted to walk away again and never look back. Let them live in the wreckage they built. But Ethan deserved better than that. He always did. When the team arrived 2 days later, everything started moving fast. The nonprofit provided a full assessment, documented Ethan's condition, and fast-tracked him into one of the best long-term care facilities in the state, fully funded by a grant they arranged in my name. They even brought in a lawyer to help me secure guardianship, since my parents were now legally and emotionally unfit to care for him. The moment the paperwork was signed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Not just because Ethan was safe, but because I had finally taken control of the story they tried to write for me. I moved Ethan into the new facility myself. I stayed with him the first 2 nights, sleeping on the couch in his room. The staff were incredible, gentle, patient, attentive. They treated him like a person, not a problem. I saw more progress in him in those 2 days than I had seen in the last 5 years. He started making eye contact. He laughed, once, when a nurse played a cartoon clip he liked. I don't think I'd ever heard him laugh before. I sat there, watching him, and I cried. Before I left the facility, I promised him I'd be back. Not just once, but often. I wasn't going to disappear again, but I also wasn't going to lose myself. I had a life back in Boston, a career, people who depended on me. And now, with Ethan safe, I could return to that life without guilt, without regret. I visited my parents one last time before I left. My mother tried to thank me, But the words came out broken, unsure. My father just looked at me, eyes heavy, pride long gone. I didn't yell. I didn't shame them. I just said the truth. You didn't lose me because of Ethan. You lost me because you never saw me. And then I left. Back in Boston, everything felt different. The city that once symbolized escape now felt like home. I returned to work, to my team, to the projects I was passionate about, but with a new drive. I started a new initiative focused on tech for siblings of children with severe disabilities. People like me, kids who grew up forgotten, silenced, sacrificed. I wanted to give them what I never had: resources, a voice, and most of all, a choice. 6 months later, Ethan is thriving. The facility says he's responding better to therapy than they expected. They send me weekly updates, videos, notes, progress reports. I visit every other weekend. Sometimes I bring him little gadgets or puzzles I've been working on. He loves them. My mother occasionally writes short emails with awkward updates, guilt folded between every line. My father never reaches out. I don't expect him to, but I'm okay with that. Because this story was never about them. It was about breaking the cycle, about choosing a different path than the one forced on me. I lost years to that house, to that guilt, to those expectations. But I got out. I built a life. And in the end, I still found a way to save Ethan on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I'm not running away from anything. I'm running towards something better. And that, finally, is enough.